All right, hello, guys. In today's episode, I interview longtime client of Summit Strength, Tisha, and she talks about her preparation and training leading into a section of the Appalachian Trail. Now, inside this episode, she shares some really interesting insights around her preparation, all the roadblocks she went through, and a whole bunch of things that did come up on the trail and how she worked through them. So this is an incredibly beneficial episode for anyone who is considering on stepping up into a big section hike, which they may not have done before, and also planning for when things do go wrong, which they so often do. So I really do hope you enjoy today's episode, and let's get into it. Hey, my name is Rowan Smith, and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast, which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare, and conquer your upcoming hike, trek, or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude, and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable, and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for. Let's get into today's episode. Okay, so welcome, Tisha. Very, very excited to have you on the show. I'm absolutely pumped because it's a long time coming, and couldn't be happier to have you on board. So this is going to be great. So to start things off for the listeners, do you just want to give me a little bit of a rundown around who you are, where you're from, what do you do, and what is your background in hiking?
Sure. So I'm Tish. I live in the United States in Mississippi, about an hour north of the Gulf of Mexico. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I work for the federal government here in the Department of Veterans Affairs. So my patients are all like combat veterans that have returned from various wars. And it's fun, but you need time away from it. So that's kind of how I got into like hiking and backpacking. I've done hiking for most of my life. I've always liked to hike, and I've always liked to camp. And probably a year and a half or 2 years ago, I decided to start putting them together and started backpacking. So I think that's when I found your podcast first, and then your Facebook group. So that's kind of how I got in with you.
Yeah, how good. Well, it's come full circle then. So found me on the podcast, and now here you are.
Yeah.
How good. So when we very first sort of started working together, like what was the initial goal that you were sort of wanting to train towards?
So I have always had it in my head that I wanted to start section hiking one of the long trails in the United States. And by that, I mean either the Pacific Crest or the Appalachian or the Continental Divide trails. And initially, I was going to start section hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. But when COVID hit, it sort of became logistically impossible to plan for that because we didn't know if we were going to be able to fly out there. We didn't know how we would get to the trail. So my hiking partner and I, we changed course and decided to start section hiking the Appalachian Trail. So that became the goal probably about halfway through, and then we decided to make that the goal.
Yeah. And so you came on board, you had this goal in mind, obviously a little bit changed around. You came on board with Summit Strength, and I really am interested in diving a little bit around the training today and talking a bit through that in detail, because you did go through a whole bunch of different variations. So tell us a little bit about the training you did do through Summit Strength. So, when initially what did your program look like for you?
So I think when we first started off, I was doing several training sessions a week of, I guess, sort of just a phased conditioning is the only way I can call it, where you would start off with, kind of light exercises to kind of get you used to moving like that, carrying a pack, aerobic stuff. And then we kind of gradually progressed to more challenging workouts, where, like the bike intervals and loaded pack walking and lots of strength training for the core and the legs. And that's really what it was. And I think we started out with like 4 or 5 days a week, was initially what we did. And then there were some pool sessions too, because I think it was summertime when we got started. So, it was a really well-rounded, kind of hit everything program.
Good. And then in amongst all that, was there anything different in there which you might not have had done before?
Yes, I had not done a lot of the like bike interval training. I'm not a fan of the bike, but I understand its place in workout. I had not done a lot of that, and I had never done like loaded pack walking on an incline before. That was totally new. I was very naive in that I thought, well, I just want a backpack. I can just put this thing on my back and go. And it is not like that.
Yeah, fair. I think a lot of us have been down that route at one stage or another. And then we sort of had something just to give us a little kick in the bum. We're like, oh, you know what? Maybe we can make this a little bit easier for ourselves.
Exactly.
So I think the big question, because I know you've been through, we've trained together for quite a while, and there was a lot of stuff that came up in amongst the way. So I think this is going to be a bit of a big question, but throughout the process, were there any roadblocks along the way? And if so, how did you overcome them as you went?
Oh my gosh, there were a lot of roadblocks. My work schedule changed pretty dramatically. And so I had to reconfigure the workouts. And I think probably halfway through, it almost seemed like I kind of lost a little bit of my motivation, to work out, because it went from initially being, something I was very excited about to something I was almost like, I'm not really sure if I don't know if I have time to do this right now. I'm so busy at work. And so we kind of worked through that. And then a hurricane came through in October and really put me out for several days, because I don't even remember the name of the hurricane now, but it was like there was a lot of damage to some of the structures around my house, and we were without power for like a week and a half. And it just became a real, I don't want to say a chore. It really turned into something that I was like, I'm just not sure I can do this right now. Maybe I should put it off. Maybe I should do this. And so you were fantastic at working me through that sort of, you got to keep the goal in mind. Remember why you're doing this, what it is you want to accomplish. And you were also fantastic about kind of meeting me where I was and letting me sort of reconfigure the workouts so that I could still progress and work out without feeling overwhelmed by all of the stress going on around me with, the hurricane and the job and, all of that. So I think that's kind of how. And I don't want to say I overcame them, because I certainly didn't do it by myself. I really think that you were an integral part of helping me overcome that. It worked out well. And then, I sort of got that drive back, and I was like, well, we've only got a few months to go until, you're doing your thing. So you better, get on the ball. So I think that's how we overcame it, but it was definitely a team effort.
Yeah. And then in thinking back to that time, like, when the motivation did take a dip, and you obviously had the hurricane came through, which not people, too many people could say that's the usual roadblock, but can you remember sort of specifics of sort of what we did to adjust around about those times?
Yeah. So when I was talking to you and I was telling you about, I'm really just feeling overwhelmed with everything I have to do, and then adding this on top, you were really good about saying, okay, well, if all you can do is, 20 minutes of walking a couple of days a week, or a stretching session. I think there was a period of time where we just did like stretching exercises a few times a week, just something to keep the habit formed, where I didn't lose the habit of working out, and something where I didn't lose the progress that we'd already made. I definitely remember doing the stretching exercises, which really helped with not only keeping my joints, healthy, but it was really a great sort of stress relief, sort of meditative time, to kind of get away from some of the things that were going on around me at the time. And then once we sort of got over that hump, with, the thing from the hurricane, we sort of gradually started adding in more sessions and more back to the strength training and the path walking and the aerobic stuff. We kind of added it back in, as I was ready for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then talk to me about some other roadblocks. I know there are a few. Like, how about talk us through your journey of testing your gear? Because I knew there were a couple of fun incidents in that.
Oh no! So where I live, it gets very, very hot in the summertime. It's usually well up over 105 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature, and the humidity is always at least 95%. So it feels sort of like a jungle from like June to September. It's really hot. And I had been testing gear. I bought a tent, a little one person. There was nothing wrong with that tent. It was a perfectly fine tent. It was a one person setup. And I decided to take it out in the summertime, which was probably not the best idea. But hey, I wanted to test the gear, right? So I hiked. It was a 6 mile in. I was going to spend the night and then hike 6 miles out, just testing the gear. And right off the bat, it was muggy. It was so hot. I put the tent up. I was fine until it was time to go to bed. And then when I got in the tent, that's when I realized this tent is small and it's tight and it's not very well ventilated. And it quickly turned into just a miserable trip. And it was only like 9:00 at night, and I remember laying there, like trying to talk myself into staying in this tent, and then it started raining. So I couldn't take the rain. I couldn't take the fly off the tent because everything was going to get soaked, but it was so hot in the tent that I couldn't stay in the tent. So I was sitting out of the tent in the rain and I finally said, okay, I've had enough. I'm going to have to bail. And so it was probably midnight before I finally bailed and ended up getting a ride back to my car and going home. And at first, I really considered it sort of a failure. Why did you bail? You can't do that when you're on the trail. But I think I had talked to you about it. And I had talked to some other, hiking people. And they were like, well, it's not a failure. You learned something. You figured out that tent is probably not going to work for you. And you figured that out before you were actually out in the middle of a trip with that tent. So at that point, I decided to get a bigger tent. So I sent that one back and got the tent that I've been using for the past almost year now. And it's a much better fit. So in looking back on it, I'm less inclined to say it was a failure now and just more of a fantastic learning experience. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then.
Yeah, that's always the way, isn't it? Like when you're in the midst of it and it's all going on, it's very, very, very hard to see that positive light or that silver lining or whatever it is. But you survived and you got through it and you learned from it. So can't ask for much more than that.
It's definitely a story that I have now, but it was not fun at the time.
So let's talk about the trail then. So at the time of recording, you sort of head out about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I'm losing track of my dates. How long ago was that you actually set off on the trail?
About 3 weeks ago. Now it's hard. Gosh, time is flying, but it was about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, so talk us through how did it all go?
So we decided so if you're familiar with the Appalachian Trail at all, there's two different ways that people start. So you can either start at Springer Mountain, and most people will start from the parking lot that's about a mile below the summit. They hike up to the summit so that they can see the terminus and, the official first blaze of the trail, and then they start their hike from there. Or you can do what's called hiking the approach trail, which goes up over Amicalola Falls. It's like an 8 mile trail up over the falls. it takes you to the top. There are hundreds of stairs that go up to the top, of the waterfall. And those stairs got damaged in that same storm, and they're not fixed yet. And so we decided that we were going to start at the parking lot and hike up that way and then start. So my hiking partner and I, we spent the night in a hostel and we got shuttled to this parking lot and we started up the approach trail. The trail going up to the terminus from the parking lot. It's about a mile. It is incredibly rocky. I was not prepared for how rocky and mountain, it's a mountain, but I was not prepared for how rocky and mountainous it actually was. There was a lot of rocks and stuff you had to scramble over. And so we got to the top and we were up there, I don't know, half an hour, and then we decided to start back down. Well, I hiked just a little bit faster than my partner. And so I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and go down and I'll meet you, down at the bottom. And I got down there and then she sent me a message that she had fallen on the mountain. So I started heading back toward where I was going to meet up with her. And when I got to her, it was obvious pretty quickly that she had seriously injured herself. She told me that she had stepped on a loose rock and actually had rolled and kind of tumbled down the side of this mountain and then fell into like a tree that was on the side of the mountain. She was very scraped up. She had a huge, like a bruised spot on her head. So we ended up having to call a shuttle to take us back to town. And I took her to the hospital. And it turns out that she actually has done herself serious mischief. She has a traumatic brain injury now. And she's still having a lot of symptoms with like dizziness and having trouble finding words sometimes. She's seriously injured herself. But anyway, so she came off the trail. I stayed off the trail with her for a day until her significant other got up there and picked her up. They took me back to the trail 20 miles in. That was the only spot that I could be dropped off was at mile 20. So I then continued on by myself. I think I finally that night when I got to a shelter there, there's like designated camp spots along the trail. I got to there and I met up with some other people that were hiking and sort of hooked in with them, and ended up going, I think I hiked 18 more miles that trip. The emergency and having to take care of my hiking partner and then get back on the trail, it kind of threw my days off a little bit. So I didn't get to do nearly as many days as I wanted to do. But I do have plans to go back over Labor Day weekend and catch the first 20 miles of the trail that I missed. And, I don't know if she will be ready to go by that time or not. So it more than likely will be another solo venture. But that trail, you cannot underestimate how difficult that trail is. It is very challenging. It's not graded for animals like the Pacific Crest Trail is. So that trail, I think, is a little more forgiving, of grades and inclines. The Appalachian Trail is not. It is very steep up and down, very mountainous, very rugged. I ended up doing a lot of what I would call rock scrambling, where I was doing some climbing over rocks, climbing down rock faces. There were parts of the trail that were only wide enough for 1 foot at a time. And then there was like sheer cliffs beside me and above me. So it was very challenging. And the Blood Mountain portion of that trail, if people are familiar with it, that was incredibly challenging for the descent. It's a 2.4 mile descent and it is all rocks. It is sheer rock cliffs. It took me a few hours to come down it. I earned my trail name on that part of the trail. But it was, it taught me that I can do hard things, and that it's okay to push yourself outside your comfort zone. because I'm scared of heights. I don't like heights. And there I was on the side of a mountain, with one little trail in front of me that was just wide enough for 1 foot. So all in all, I think it went well. We did have a sort of encounter with a bear the last night of the trip. And that was interesting. I had a bear canister. I was carrying a bear canister with my food, and I heard him sort of messing with it in the middle of the night, and I could hear him walking around the campsite. And I was terrified until I realized, he's probably just looking for the food. He's not going to do anything to you. And he did wander off, but your mind plays a lot of tricks on you in the night. Everything sounds incredibly loud, incredibly close. And it was interesting, but even the bear canister made it home safely. So
well, fair. So yeah, lots of stuff to go into there. And, so talk to me. Obviously, you've had this, this big incident on day one, which is just obviously not expected. It's crazy. It's, so much going on. Like, how did you, over that sort of 24, 48 hour period, how did you sort of mentally adjust for saying, okay, now I'm potentially going to be hiking by myself, and, this whole plan is very changed. How did you go about adjusting, inside your own head during that?
Well, I'm kind of lucky. I'm a nurse, and my specialty is mental health. So I feel like I'm pretty good at compartmentalizing and sort of dealing with, challenges that happen. So once we made sure, we took her to the hospital, we made sure she was safe. And then I started planning, okay, you're going to be by yourself. What do you need to be worried about? And a lot of the trips that I've taken in my life have been solo trips. I'm the traveler in my family. I will go anywhere, anytime, doesn't matter. And not everybody wants to do that. So I end up by myself a lot. So the idea of being by myself was fine. Being by myself in the mountains on this very, very treacherous at points trail was something different. So I kind of sat down and said, okay, what have you done to prepare yourself for any, possible emergencies, And so I went through my stuff. I had my little first aid kit. I have a Garmin InReach Mini that I hike with. And it sort of, it lets people track where you are, and you can send text messages to friends and family that you have programmed into the device, so people would know where I was. And, it has a little SOS button on it. If you get hurt, you can push that button, and it will figure out where you are with satellite, and it will summon the nearest search and rescue to you from where you are. And then I had to kind of contend with, okay, what are you going to do about possible animal encounters on the trail? Because, that is an area that's well known for, black bears and things. And so you just kind of have to think logically through, okay, what do you know about bears, and what have you been told that you need to do? And so it really just becomes a matter of, you're going to have to be very careful about putting into practice what you should be doing. Because I think when you're with a group, it's easier to sort of get a little lax on, the things that you're supposed to be doing because you're with other people, but when you're alone, you have to rely on yourself, And even after I had hooked up with that other group of hikers during the day, they hiked a lot faster than me. I'm not the fastest hiker. And they were usually a mile or so ahead of me. So I was still, hiking alone during the day. And so, it just became a little bit different in terms of I had to pay much more attention to what was going on around me and pay more attention to my own safety because I didn't have other people to rely on. So that's kind of what I did.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you said a really interesting thing earlier as well, which I wanted to dive into, and in the fact that you said, you're in this sort of mountainous terrain, you've got these these ledges and these drops and this and that, but on top of that, you're also, as you said, sort of scared of heights, and it's not your favorite thing in the world. How did you deal with that, and did you have any little tricks or any tactics that you used to sort of help yourself in that situation?
Yeah, so I think you and I have talked a lot about, my love of like roller coasters and stuff, and they go really high, really fast. And I love that, but it was a lot to overcome that because it's high, they're high up in the air. And I sort of applied the same thing that I used to get me onto the coasters to get through those sections of the trail, because I would tell myself, if you hate this, you're only on it for a couple minutes and then it's done, and so that's what I would kind of do. And I would see this little spot in the trail where it looked kind of treacherous. I would say, okay, just keep your eyes on the track in front of you, which is a roller coaster trick, right? You watch the track in front of you as you're going. Keep your eyes on the trail and put one foot in front of the other and just move through it, and then I would tell myself, well, you're here. You're either going to have to turn around and go back or you're going to have to go across that. So what are your options, And so that was kind of how I would, work my way across those spots. And as far as like the rock faces and things like that, I would appreciate the views if I had stopped like for lunch or something, or, stop for a break. But if I was walking and had to like sit down and go over a little rock face or a rock ledge, I did not look out. I did not look down. I just kept my eyes on the trail so that it kind of narrowed my focus. And I think that really helped.
Okay. And then through all this, like through this entire sort of adventure, we talked about the mental, but how did the sort of physical hold up? Like how did the body get through it day to day? How did that all go on that front?
Well, I think it went very well, considering that, I'm sort of a newbie hiker, and my pack is probably a little heavier than a lot of people would want to carry. I feel like I managed it well because we did the training with the heavy pack, the loaded pack walking and pushing that weight. I felt like I carried it well. And I really tried very hard every day to, get up and do my, warm up exercises before I started walking and take the breaks, because as you know, I'm very bad about taking breaks when I need to. I tried very hard to take a break every couple of miles. And then at night when I got done, I would spend some time, stretching, and I brought my little cork ball with me, and I would roll out my feet and roll out the muscles in my legs. And, what shocked me after that whole thing, I did not have to take any ibuprofen at all on the trail. I was not sore at all, which was shocking to me because of the work, because you were climbing, you would change. I think Blood Mountain is like, you go up 1,000 feet in elevation over like not even a mile, you are really pushing, straight up, straight down. And it's really challenging, but I really feel like the training that we did really prepared me. And so I was very happy with how my body responded to that challenge.
Awesome. Well, that's really good to hear. No ibuprofen. That's a massive win in itself. How good. So at the end of this hike then, once you sort of hopped off the trail, for the last time, like how did you feel at the end of it all, and sort of what was going through your head once it was all done?
I was really sad. I think there probably is such a thing as a post-trail depression. It's something I think about all the time. I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to keep going. I'm ready to get back out there. So I was really sad, that I was having to come off the trail, and really I feel very accomplished, that I was able to go, and maybe I didn't go as far as I wanted to go, and maybe things didn't go exactly the way we want, but a lot of stuff in life does not go the way you want, and you have to be able to kind of work around that and kind of work through that. And I think I did that pretty well, and still had like what I would consider the trip of a lifetime, certainly the first of many trips back to that trail to finish it. So yeah, I think it was a weird mixture of very happy and very sad.
Mm-hmm. And then on that note, what is the plan of attack for your hiking moving forward? Like, what's the process in the future going to look like for you?
Well, so I've started back in with, I'm going to continue training with you with just like general sort of strength training, weight training, keeping sort of fit, getting, just general conditioning. And then, I think in September, I'm going to go back and finish the first 20 miles that I missed. And that'll be the plan, from here on out. I'm going to hit trails around here. And, with where I live, there are not many hikers. If I walk around with my pack, people look at me like, why are you, what are you doing? Nobody knows, the nearest hiking trail to me is nearly an hour and a half from here. So it often involves a lot of travel. So I'm going to get those in where I can, and keep pushing toward doing, knocking out sections of this trail, and there's a couple of other longer trails, in the vicinity. In North Alabama, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Pinhoti Trail. That's definitely on my radar to do. There's some trails in like the eastern seaboard of the U.S. The Foothills Trail is in like North and South Carolina, and it's a little separate trail from the Appalachian Trail. So yeah, that's my plan. I'm just going to save up time from work and, go knock them out when I can.
Nice. So a few pretty cool things in your sights ahead, to say the least.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice. And then if anyone was sort of in this stage where they were in a similar position to you and they were like, you know what, I'm sort of considering stepping onto, this adventure, this trail, and, doing something similar in this section, like what advice could you give them if they were in a similar position?
I would definitely tell them to, first of all, research research the gear that you want to use, first of all, and then make sure that you're getting and testing it so that you have all of that dialed in before you leave, so that you know exactly how to light your stove or how to put your tent up or how, know how your feet are going to respond in your shoes. Because, I've had a huge problem with blisters before, while I was still kind of getting everything together. All that's been dialed in, and that was only through a lot of trial and error. So don't be afraid to do a lot of trial runs. Even if you're just putting your tent up in your yard and doing that stuff in the yard, do it. Make sure you know how to use your equipment. Definitely get involved in a program like we did for training, for strength training, because I really feel like working with you probably gave me a significant advantage over people who were just hopping on the trail with no prior conditioning at all. I felt like I was very physically and mentally prepared for what I was doing. So definitely that. And don't underestimate that trip. Don't underestimate the trail. Make sure that you are as prepared as you can be for the things that are happening, because things are going to happen. People are going to get hurt. People are going to leave and enter the trail. You may have encounters with animals. You may have encounters with broken gear. Make sure you're prepared for those things, and then have fun.
How good. Well, definitely some solid advice there. And I think all of that, like, regardless whether someone's doing, this particular trip or any of them, I think it's all pretty timeless advice there. And yeah, and it's been so good, like, chatting through this all, Tish, because, like, yeah, it's been, from my end, working with you over these last 12, 14 months or whatever it's ended up being, it's been so incredible to see sort of you sort of work through all these things that have popped up along the way, the gear things, the trial and error, the weather, the dips in motivation, the work, the pandemic, and all of this. And you sort of adjusted, adapted, and it was really incredible as a coach to see you work through all this. And I thought it would be so valuable to get you on today to talk through all of this and everything you've gone through. And it's been so good, like, just hearing a little bit about the journey and the story and everything. And I really do think a lot of people will appreciate hearing this, appreciate hearing the struggles, and appreciate just, the approaches and the adjustments you've made. And yeah, so it's been all in all, it's been amazing having you on this episode today. And I really do appreciate you coming on board.
Well, absolutely. It was my pleasure. I've really enjoyed working with you, and I love to see people get out and enjoy the outside and push themselves. Don't be afraid to try something new and hard, because you might love it.
So thank you so much for coming on today, Tisha. Thank you again. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So there you go, guys. I really do hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and I really do hope you've gotten some very interesting insights from Tisha's story. Now, if you were in a similar situation for Tisha and you were planning on stepping up into a big section hike or a big adventure, and you want to make sure that you're in the best physical and mental position to not only get through this adventure, but be ready for anything that may go wrong in the process and actually on the trail, I would absolutely love to hear from you. If you were interested in learning a little bit more about the program that Tisha worked through, you can find the information at summitstrength.com.au/online. That's summitstrength.com.au/online, and I'll leave a link in the show notes below. So if you did want to get ready for a big adventure, you can find me there, read a little bit about the program, and I'll tell you exactly how best to reach out. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.